when you needed an unusual sound that wasn't part of the orchestra kit, you start going, call Emil.
The best film composers craft the perfect sonic textures to enhance the dramatic experience and emotional impact of watching a movie.
You didn't need to just speak musically to him. You could just say a feeling, and he knew intrinsically what to do with that.
To find that ideal sound, they don't always rely on conventional tools. The instruments used to make these compositions are often rare and unusual.
He was obviously going around the world hitting things. And as he hit it, he was listening for a sound.
There's one guy in particular who's responsible for some of the most recognizable sounds in films of the last 5 decades. Emil Richards.
He's pretty much played on everything, you know. I felt so special that he was working on my things, but then when you look at what he's wearing, I'm like, oh, he's worked on everything.
Emil was a percussionist, highly regarded by the studio industry for a couple of key reasons.
First, he was a virtuoso player, and he was behind some pretty iconic parts, like the finger snaps in the Addams Family theme song, the bongos in Mission Impossible, or that cool Xylo lick in the Simpsons theme. But he was also known for his gigantic collection of percussion instruments from around the world. And this collection, ever growing, well, he'd take it and he'd work with film composers to develop sounds for their scores. I'm Abby Savell. I am a professional musician and sound collector in the LA area. We're here at LA Percussion Rentals, Warehouse 1.
I talked to some composers whose work you may recognize, and they had a lot to say about Emil Richards and his instruments.
I just learned early on that he was like a collector of a lot of things. And then every time I was looking for some unusual instrument, it would be like, oh yeah, gotta check out Emil. Emil's the one.
Emil's influence on film music was, you can't measure it. You can't measure it because, you know, he wasn't a player that would just come in and play what was on the page for you. He would come in and arm himself with a million ideas as well. Not just ideas, but instruments. He would bring things that you never even thought of, that you never knew existed.
Emil could introduce you to 10 different instruments from whatever region you were talking about and make them work. And not just for the sake of doing something unusual, but was distinctive, unusual, and contributed to the storytelling of the score.
Finding and collecting these things and bringing them together into one collection, that was his life's work. That was his great contribution, other than being a wonderful musician and having played on 1,000 film scores.
And the reason so many of the scores that he participated in are so memorable are because of the sort of the sonic palettes that he brought to them.
I would be very vague about it. I just wish we had a little bit more pulse, but it needs to be more mysterious. So we experiment, we do lots and lots of layers and see which ones worked.
He would always have 10 alternatives to whatever the composer thought that he wanted.
And that came from him spending years just collecting anything that made noise.
The thing that he kind of like took from like theory into practice for me was this concept of all sounds are up for grabs.
Yeah.
When you become okay with using different types of implements on the instrument,
Yep.
as long as it's not going to injure the instrument, or maybe you strike the instrument in a different area, like a different part of the bar, or maybe you use a different striking technique. It's like all up for grabs.
Absolutely. He would just walk around and he would hit something, and if it made an interesting sound to him, he would say, how much do you want for that?
I mean, it's almost like a whole orchestra of instruments that is only really being available in Hollywood.
I have many of these unique instruments from Emil's actual collection, as I acquired them from him before he passed away in 2019.
Since I have access to a big part of Emil Richards' crazy instrument collection, I wanted to share some of these instruments with you and see how they were used in major films. The first instrument I'm going to show you is one of a kind, the Flapamba. The Flapamba is popular with composers because it's a bit of a chameleon. Depending on the type of mallet you use, it can really change its character. You have an instrument here that is chromatic. Emil actually got it in the 1960s, 1970s from Pro Drum Shop in Hollywood. Originally, it was just this upper section right here. And then in the early 2000s, he decided he wanted to kind of like a bass part of it. So he got this
lower section that kind of completed the instrument for him. However, he wanted continuity, so he actually got this upper section redone. So it was actually an entirely new instrument. The Flapamba is 3.5 octaves, and as you can see here, it's actually pinched on one end. So this is different than other like mallet instruments like xylophone, marimba, which are suspended from two ends. This is actually pinched at one end right here. This is kind of like a giant wood kalimba or mbira.
It's the weirdest tuning of any instrument I've ever had. It's a very unique instrument, and everyone knows that I had the only one, so they ask for it a lot. We used them on Lost along with the original set, which was used on every single episode for the 5 or 7 years that Lost played. That was one of the original instruments always used on that show.
I wanted to have something like a marimba, but I was like, is there anything like a marimba, but it's not really a marimba? What do you have that? And he goes, I got it. Don't worry about it. I got it. And then they wheeled in this giant brown box looking thing that it looked like a marimba that had not been fully unpacked. And he started playing melodic stuff. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And it had a marimba feel, but it had a more of a resonant sort of aftertaste, if you will, to the sound. And I said, well, can you just do something spooky or something like that? And he did this, and it was very atonal and I was like, that's another thing that is all over Lost. that
Right.
And I would just write in the scores. I would just write this spooky Flapamba fill. I would just write that down on the percussion line, and and he knew exactly what I wanted.
So I can't actually post any clips from Lost, the TV show, because of music rights issues, but you may recognize the sound, which is the Flapamba. Flapamba was used a bit in Frozen in 2013 in the song Fixer Upper. So I was actually fortunate enough to help Bobby Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez pick out the Flapamba for Fixer Upper. Hey, that's me in the photo. Here's just the Flapamba part from Fixer Upper in Frozen. These are BOOBAMS. So BOOBAMS are actually a chromatically tuned set of little micro drums. So they're not just tubes, they actually have heads on the top of each and every one of them. They were used in a variety of ways. Basically, when the composer wanted to invoke a sense of otherworldliness, or also just looking for maybe like a pitched drum sound, that was a good application for these. Because essentially, this is a tuned set of drums. And they're not like large toms, they're actually much more tonal than that. One of the things that's very cool about them is that they basically just invoke this sense of a different place, but not specific to an actual region or culture. They're very versatile. Here's the BOOBAMS in the first few seconds of the TV show, The Odd Couple.
On November 13th, Felix Unger was asked to remove himself from his place of residence.
The movie Planet of the Apes, composed by Jerry Goldsmith, uses BOOBAMS multiple times through the soundtrack. In fact, check out the BOOBAMS listed here in the score. And you can see Emil's name written in as well. movie Pink Panther by Henry Mancini kind of has these little running lines. Then there's this bluesy number from the Batman TV show by Neil Hefti. And it even has this bluesy boobam solo. So I'm not gonna play the exact thing here, but I'll just do my own. Boobams made their way into straight ahead jazz, like in Chet Baker's Young Chet album, a song called Night on Bop Mountain. So this probably isn't actually the real set because that was played by Bill Lowborough, who was the actual inventor of boobams. And although probably not this set because it was recorded in London, if you listen to Star Wars Return of the Jedi by John Williams, you can hear boobams kind of tightly wound into this little harmony line. Finally, I'm going to show you an instrument that Emil Richards decided to name the rub rods because they're rods and you rub them. It's about an octave. It's chromatically tuned. And for it, we use gloves and rosin, like for string instruments, because it helps the friction. You need some friction when you actually play. They're actually fashioned after the aluminum harp, which is an antique instrument made by the J.C. Deegan Company. They were actually made by an aerospace engineer from San Diego in the 1970s, and he approached Emil and said, "Hey, I got this cool instrument. Let me come bring it to you and you can check it out." Here's that actual clip from Lethal Weapon.
Oh,
Listen for those rub rods in Back to the Future, right where they reveal the DeLorean for the first time. Because of the lack of records and secretive nature of many recording sessions, we don't always know on each one who played what. But we do know that Emil Richards was a pioneer. And by his account and other accounts, he was pretty instrumental in bringing over eclectic and ethnic instruments to the US music recording scene. So have you heard any of those unique sounds in a movie soundtrack and you want to know what it is? Leave it in the comments below and let's see if we can figure it out. So if you like what you see here and you want to see more, push subscribe and hit that bell, because that action actually helps me be able to make more content. Check out my next video with rub rods. We go a little deeper, a little adventurous, and I will leave that link in the description.